Why this tale unfolds as it does, I shall now disclose. Even the most innocent of children suffered at the hands of this monster. Among the many cases of moral decay covered on my channel, this one stands out as exceptionally heinous, for children should never be subjected to harm. This case is among the most horrifying that law enforcement has ever encountered. The pursuit of a better life leads many to depart from their homelands. This same quest inspired the heroine of our story to traverse thousands of kilometers. During her year and a half in the United Kingdom, she faced and overcame numerous challenges familiar to migrants, except for one. Benny Lynn Burke, a native of the Philippines born in November 1995, embodied the hopes of her parents, whose financial situation was dire. From a young age, she demonstrated intelligence, cheerfulness, ambition, and grand aspirations. At 19, she met Lexington Burke, a man 40 years her senior, on a dating site. He resided in the UK and managed rental properties. Their online communication blossomed until the man expressed his desire to meet her in person. He traveled to the Philippines, saw her impoverished living conditions, but was captivated by her. Their social differences did not deter him. Instead, they strengthened their bond. He stayed in the Philippines for her, and they began dating. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. Her lover was thrilled, proposed to her, and she accepted. In July 2018, they married in the Philippines, and a month later, on August 20th, their daughter Jellica was born. Raising a child in the Philippines was out of the question, so Lexington suggested they move to the UK. After much consideration, she decided to take this significant step for her daughter's sake. In 2019, at the age of 24, she, her husband, and their baby relocated to the United Kingdom. However, their life together did not bring happiness. Alongside the stress of moving to a new country, relationship issues surfaced and quickly worsened, leading to their separation. Despite being alone with a child in a foreign country, she was not left entirely on her own. Post-divorce, she moved with her daughter to a rented apartment in Kingswood, just a few kilometers from Bristol, arranged by her ex-husband. Benny Lynn was filled with enthusiasm, enjoying motherhood, and dedicating all her efforts to her daughter's development and upbringing. She frequently interacted with other single mothers in the park who were in similar situations. It was clear to everyone that her daughter was her world, and she was determined to provide her with a better life. Benny Lynn, though supported by her ex-husband, desired financial independence for herself and her daughter. She began reselling vacuum cleaner parts online and secured a part-time job at a nursing home. Nevertheless, she remained committed to her family, sending part of her earnings back to the Philippines. She maintained daily communication with her relatives via video calls, despite the 8-hour time difference. By February 2021, at the age of 26, Benny Lynn felt ready to explore a new relationship and find love again. She signed up on Filipina Cupid, a specialized dating platform where Filipino women could connect with men from around the world. It was here that she met 50-year-old Andrew Innes from Scotland, born in 1970, who was twice her age. The considerable age difference did not bother Benny Lynn, as it aligned with her cultural upbringing. Many Filipinos believe that an older husband is wiser and better equipped to care for the family. Andrew, well-educated, worked as a freelance developer for several computer game companies. His freelance work allowed him to travel extensively and provided him with a substantial income. Prior to meeting Benny Lynn, Andrew had lived in Japan for many years, where he was married to a local woman. They had a child in 2002, but their marriage ended in divorce in 2019. After returning to Scotland, Andrew resumed his search for a partner, specifically looking for a Filipina on the dating site, as he was drawn to exotic women. He came across Benny Lynn's profile, was immediately captivated, and reached out to her. Benny Lynn and Andrew quickly found a connection. Keen to meet her in person, Andrew planned a trip to bring her and her daughter to his home. Benny Lynn agreed, finding Andrew polite and kind. On February 18, 2021, he drove 700 kilometers to bring his new girlfriend and her daughter to Scotland. During the trip, Benny Lynn video called her sister Shelley, who lived in the Philippines. Benny was delighted that Andrew had made such a long journey for her and was even surprised by it. Andrew joined the conversation and met her sister through the video chat. They all had a wonderful time talking and even sharing jokes. Andrew made a positive impression on her sister. Benny Lynn's life seemed to be taking a positive turn. She was enthusiastic about her new relationship and the prospects it brought. Her family back in the Philippines was happy to see her finding joy again. Despite the challenges she had faced, Benny Lynn remained optimistic and determined to build a better life for herself and her daughter. On the following day, Benny Lynn's new companion familiarized her with the local surroundings. They explored various landmarks and parks, after which Benny Lynn shared her experiences with her sister through a video call. It was evident that Benny was radiant with joy, a mood her sister hadn't witnessed in her for quite some time. Benny Lynn also showcased the house where her new friend resided, an old but well-kept dwelling. This was their last communication on February 20th, 2021. For the next 2 days, Benny Lynn and her daughter did not make any contact. Her sister attempted to reach her repeatedly, initially thinking there might be connectivity issues. However, she gradually realized that something was amiss. Eventually, Andrew himself contacted her, relaying an astonishing tale. He claimed that Benny Lynn and her daughter were with another man in Glasgow, supposedly hiding from her ex-husband, Lexington. According to Andrew, Lexington intended to gain custody of their daughter and deport Benny Lynn back to the Philippines. His account sounded convincing, despite her sister's knowledge that Lexington had previously shared custody peacefully without any disputes. Andrew persuaded Shelley that her sister would make contact as soon as it was safe. He advised her to discard her mobile phone, refrain from calling him or Benny Lynn, and change her number to prevent Lexington from reaching them. Although Shelley did not dispose of her phone as suggested, she remained quiet for a while. However, as Benny Lynn still did not make contact, her sister exhausted all available options to reach her, including various messengers and video call platforms, but to no avail. Upon contacting Andrew again, he reassured her that her sister was safe and in the company of a trustworthy individual, a teacher. He emphasized that Scotland was inherently peaceful with no crime, and nothing untoward could happen to her. Shelley believed him once more and waited patiently for her sister to make contact, but it never happened. After 4 days of waiting, Shelley devised a plan to verify Andrew's claims. She requested a video of Benny Lynn speaking about herself and her daughter, addressing her directly. Andrew insisted that Benny Lynn and her baby were fine, but instead of a new video, he sent an old one recorded days before their disappearance. It showed them strolling in Scotland. He reiterated that they needed to wait until Benny Lynn and her daughter felt completely secure from Lexington before they could safely make contact. This response heightened Shelley's concern, as her request had not been fulfilled and the situation seemed increasingly peculiar. She persisted in trying to ascertain the truth from Andrew. Andrew replied that, to safeguard himself from Benny Lynn's ex-husband, he would delete all data from his mobile phone and switch it off. Fearful of being found, he stated he would cease further communication, but reassured her that he was taking every measure to ensure the girls could contact each other when the chance arose. Shelley grew skeptical of Andrew's claims, suspecting something awry. However, being on the other side of the world, she felt helpless. On February 19th, Benny Lynn's ex-husband, Lexington, visited her residence to take their daughter for an outing, a routine practice post-divorce. He had legal rights to spend time with his child on specific days. Nevertheless, no one answered the door. Attempts to reach Benny Lynn by phone went unanswered for several days, raising his suspicion. Worried, he alerted the police on March 1st, reporting his ex-wife and daughter missing. Promptly, the police initiated a search. investigating Benny Lynn's house yielded no clues. Detectives appealed to the public for information from anyone who had recent contact with Benny Lynn, hoping someone might know her whereabouts. Simultaneously, they traced her phone and bank card activities, but found neither active. They also scrutinized her social media and messaging apps to determine her circle of contacts and uncover leads. By March 5th, police had gathered sufficient information to learn that Benny Lynn had recently met a man who traveled to meet her, and they journeyed to Scotland with her daughter. The last known location of her phone was traced to Dundee, Scotland. Police proceeded there and examined CCTV footage from the area. They spotted Benny Lynn with her daughter and an older man, presumably the one she had recently encountered online. Both appeared calm, indicating they were likely safe and simply off the grid. Later, detectives identified the vehicle the couple was using. The license plates led them to Andrew Innes's residence on Trun Avenue in Dundee. They confirmed that Andrew was the man Benny Lynn had met online and was seen with the missing individuals on camera. Upon visiting his house to question him, the man refused to open the door, citing lockdown restrictions due to the pandemic's peak. He also claimed his daughter had just bathed, and he didn't want her catching a chill, thus declining to open the door. Andrew's explanations appeared utterly implausible under the circumstances. The investigators' primary goal was to locate Benny Lynn and her child, ensuring their safety and well-being. Through the door, police engaged with the man, who admitted to meeting Benny Lynn. He claimed they spent time together before he took them to a Glasgow cafe to meet a friend, after which he hadn't seen them. During this doorstep conversation, an officer spotted a little girl inside the house through a window. Clad in dry clothes with dry hair, she lay on the couch, engrossed in television. This contradicted Andrew's shower excuse, suggesting he was concealing something and heightening police suspicion. Insistent, the officers gained entry when Andrew finally opened the door. Inside, chaos reigned. Kitchen furniture, appliances, table, and dishes cluttered the stairs, the kitchen mid-renovation. The floor was torn up with Andrew laying new tiles. Upon questioning, the girl denied being the homeowner's daughter, further alarming the officers. They pressed Andrew, demanding to contact Benny Lynn and confirm her safety. Andrew claimed he couldn't reach her, despite attempts. Police then demanded details of the man who allegedly took Benny Lynn and her daughter, launching a kidnapping and potential murder investigation. Andrew grew visibly anxious, but provided no information about his acquaintance. Eventually, he crumbled, confessing to a fatal altercation with Benny Lynn, her body concealed beneath the kitchen floor. Urgently, police inquired about Jellica's whereabouts. Andrew revealed the girl on the couch was not Jellica, who was with her mother. Following this admission, Andrew was arrested. Several items were seized as potential evidence. The operation to recover the bodies from beneath the concrete spanned 2 arduous weeks. There, they found the remains of Benny Lynn and Jellica, the house having become their literal grave. Andrew's attempted cover-up with new tiles remained incomplete. Thus, the chilling truth emerged from beneath the unfinished tiles, unraveling the grim fate of Benny Lynn and her daughter, Jellica. The house, intended as a home, transformed into a concealed tomb, concealing the dark secret Andrew had desperately tried to hide. The meticulous work of the investigators brought the haunting reality to light, ensuring justice could be served. Upon examining Andrew's communication devices, police discovered his subscriptions to several sites featuring Filipino women. His interest lay specifically in single mothers aged 20 to 30, with whom he maintained active correspondence. Investigators delved into his exchanges with Benny Lynn, revealing his repeated attempts to entice her with promises of well-paid jobs or feigned friendship. Ultimately, he succeeded in persuading her that he was a decent, affluent man, capable of caring for her and her child. Trusting and unsuspecting, Benny Lynn embarked on the trip without any belongings, not even a change of clothes, likely anticipating a brief outing. Andrew's devices also yielded a chilling history of sinister search queries. Topics included committing crimes, chloroform, Scottish crime and police procedures, and body disposal methods, all conducted prior to the fateful encounter. Police uncovered the intricate web of deceit Andrew spun to mislead Benny Lynn's sister, though his meticulous planning was ultimately foiled. Fortuitously, Benny Lynn maintained contact with her ex-husband, whose concern prompted him to alert authorities to her disappearance. Throughout the investigation, the accused altered his testimony multiple times. Initially, he claimed self-defense, stating that Benny Lynn attacked him with a knife after he failed to calm her daughter. However, his final account was far more sinister. Upon their arrival, Andrew saw in Benny Lynn a reflection of all his past wives embodying their worst qualities. Overwhelmed by rage, he resolved to kill her. Seizing a hammer, Andrew struck Benny Lynn on the back of the head, continuing until she showed no signs of life. Mid-assault, he recalled owning a decorative samurai sword. Retrieving it, he proceeded to strike her lifeless body repeatedly. Subsequently, he moved her corpse upstairs, placing it in the bathtub for several days while contemplating his next move. During this period, he cohabited with the deceased, growing increasingly irritated by the girl's incessant calls for her mother. Deeming it logical to send her to her mother, he strangled the child, concealed both bodies in garbage bags, wrapped them in blankets and tarp, and buried them beneath the kitchen floor under fresh concrete. Andrew confessed that his initial plan involved disposing of the bodies in a reservoir. However, given the ongoing kitchen renovation, he opted for the easier burial solution. Autopsies confirmed Benny Lynn's cause of death as a combination of severe head injuries and chest stab wounds, while Jellica succumbed to strangulation. Additionally, a 7-year-old girl found in Andrew's house was revealed to be his sexual captive, held for approximately 2 weeks until the police intervention. Thus, the grim tapestry of Andrew's crimes unraveled, exposing a chilling narrative of deceit, violence, and ultimately murder. The meticulous investigation by law enforcement brought to light the harrowing truth, ensuring that justice could be served for the lives so brutally taken. Upon examining the house, officers discovered a makeshift sleeping area on the living room floor, adorned with soft toys, where a girl had been resting. The girl's account to detectives verified the grim details. She revealed that the abductor had sexually assaulted a 2-year-old girl multiple times while she was alive, using handcuffs, socks, and tape to silence and restrain the girls, preventing them from struggling or making noise. These chilling particulars made this case one of the most horrendous encountered by local law enforcement. Andrew's neighbors and acquaintances were appalled by the revelations. They had regarded him as a normal, albeit private and somewhat secretive, individual. His only notable peculiarity was an obsession with cleanliness. The family of the deceased and her ex-husband were equally horrified by Andrew's inhumane actions, struggling to comprehend the monstrous nature of his crimes, luring, torturing, and murdering a mother and her daughter. Investigators uncovered the murder weapon, a large hammer, along with handcuffs, a sock, and tape bearing the DNA of both victims and the perpetrator. These items, purchased a week before the crime, indicated premeditation. The careful planning underscored the chilling intent behind Andrew's actions. In February 2023, Andrew Innes's trial commenced. The prosecution argued that his actions were deliberate from the outset. He specifically targeted a single mother with a daughter, living far from relatives, ensuring no one would search for them. The prosecutor posited that the true target was not Benny Lynn, but her daughter, towards whom Andrew harbored an unhealthy obsession. His initial plan involved eliminating the mother to gain unrestricted access to the child. The defense contended that Andrew was in a state of insanity during the crime, warranting psychiatric help rather than imprisonment. However, the prosecution refuted this claim, citing the meticulous nature of his actions. A psychiatric evaluation revealed diagnoses of autism spectrum disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and Crohn's disease. Andrew claimed that a double dosage of steroid medications induced hallucinations, influencing his actions. The psychiatrist dismissed this narrative, asserting that his ability to plan and behave normally in society indicated sanity. Andrew accused the captive girl of fabricating the abuse story, labeling her mentally unstable. He denied assaulting her or Jellica. However, medical examinations revealed evidence of violence on both victims, including the defendant's DNA. Despite his protests, the jury, after careful deliberation, found him guilty on all charges. These included the premeditated murder of Benny Lynn, the abuse and killing of her daughter, and the confinement and abuse of a 7-year-old girl discovered in Andrew's house. Thus, the harrowing tale of Andrew's crimes unfolded, revealing a meticulously planned and executed series of heinous acts. The weight of evidence and the chilling testimonies ensured that justice was served, holding Andrew accountable for the lives he so brutally took and the innocence he so cruelly violated. Andrew was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 36 years. Andrew has filed several appeals, but all of them have been rejected. The police are still investigating Andrew's involvement in a number of similar unsolved cases and believe there is a high likelihood of his participation. However, he denies all of it. It's heartbreaking to think about what the victims and their families have gone through. I sincerely hope this monster named Andrew never gets out and that his appeals continue to be denied. The police need to thoroughly investigate his possible involvement in other unsolved cases to ensure justice for all the victims. This story is incredibly upsetting and raises many questions. In the tranquil suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Drive, the afternoon of March 15, 2022, was shattered at approximately 1 p.m. Bob Harper, entering their bedroom, stumbled upon a chilling sight. His wife Sandra lay naked and lifeless on their bed, strangled with her own panties. His heart racing and hands trembling, Bob grasped his phone to dial 911. Swiftly, the 911 operator responded, and Bob, voice quivering with disbelief and fear, reported, "My wife? She's not breathing. I think she's dead." The operator remained on the line, asking questions to calm him and gather details while dispatching emergency services. Minutes later, the Harper residence was filled with the wail of sirens. Paramedics rushed in, their expressions grave and focused. In the bedroom, they confirmed Bob's dreadful suspicion. Sandra was indeed gone. Sandra Harper, a 41-year-old educator residing in Savannah, Georgia, was beloved by all who knew her. She was renowned for her kindness and devotion to her students at Ellis Elementary School. Living in a grand, beautiful home on Arsley Park with her husband Bob, Sandra had graduated from the University of Georgia with an education degree and had taught for nearly 2 decades. She was deeply involved in her community, actively participating in her church's events and programs, and was a member of a local book club that met every Thursday evening. She had a particular fondness for mystery novels, especially those penned by Agatha Christie. Sandra's family was close-knit. Her parents, James and Margaret Collins, lived nearby and visited frequently. Though she and Bob had no children, they were very close to their niece Jenny, who resided in the same neighborhood. Sandra's warm and inviting personality made her a beacon of positivity to colleagues and friends, always ready to lend a helping hand or offer a listening ear. In the days preceding her demise, Sandra eagerly anticipated a weekend getaway with Bob to Tybee Island. She had planned this surprise trip to celebrate their 17th wedding anniversary, hoping to rekindle their recently strained relationship. Her final days were filled with joy and anticipation, oblivious to the tragic fate that awaited her. Promptly, the police were on the scene, headed by Detective Linda Martinez and her partner, Detective John Harris. Renowned for her scrupulous eye for detail, Detective Martinez, alongside Detective Harris, known for his intuitive understanding of human behavior, commenced their investigation immediately. Detective Harris ushered Bob Harper away from the tumultuous scene inside, inviting him to sit on the porch to answer some questions. He inquired about Bob's whereabouts on the night of the murder. Bob asserted he was away on business, recounting his discovery of Sandra upon his return and the subsequent call to 911. His voice was barely audible, his confusion and grief palpable as he struggled to comprehend who would want to harm his wife. Concurrently, Detective Martinez swiftly scrutinized the crime scene, her expression darkening as she surveyed the disarray in the bedroom. 2 elegant glasses lay on the floor, an unopened champagne bottle rested by the dresser, and a bucket of melted ice stood nearby. A satin nightgown was draped over a lamp on the nightstand. Bed covers were cast aside, sheets untucked. Sandra's body lay naked on the bed, her panties wrapped around her neck, her face marred by signs of a brutal struggle. The scene was both devastating and unsettling. With no indications of forced entry, it appeared Sandra knew her assailant, and a romantic encounter had taken a violent turn. The autopsy would provide more answers. The detectives were meticulous, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Detective Martinez began collecting evidence, diligently lifting fingerprints from various surfaces, hoping to find a match in the police database. Meanwhile, Detective Harris focused on photographing the scene, documenting every piece of evidence. They discovered the panties used as the murder weapon, carefully bagging them for further analysis. DNA samples were collected from under Sandra's fingernails, suggesting she might have scratched her attacker in self-defense. Outside, the forensic team arrived and commenced their work. Using specialized lighting, they searched for bodily fluids that could offer additional clues. Hair samples and fibers were collected from the bed and surrounding area. Each piece of evidence was vital in reconstructing the events leading to Sandra's tragic end. Neighbors began to congregate, murmuring among themselves, their gazes fixed on the Harper house with worry. Those who knew Sandra were incredulous, unable to fathom that such a horrific act could befall someone so kind and caring. Throughout the advancing afternoon, Detectives Martinez and Harris pressed on with their investigation, steadfast in their pursuit of truth and justice for Sandra and her mourning family. They understood that solving this heinous crime demanded a meticulous and systematic approach. Their relentless drive fueled their efforts to uncover the perpetrator behind Sandra's murder. The initial individual called to the police station for interrogation was Sandra's husband, Bob Harper. At 43, Bob was a prosperous real estate entrepreneur in Savannah, Georgia, recognized for his charismatic and sociable demeanor. Often labeled a social butterfly, he could be vain and somewhat narcissistic, always preoccupied with preserving his attractive and youthful image. Nevertheless, his ambition and respect within his field were undeniable. Detectives Martinez and Harris led the interrogation, probing Bob's whereabouts on the night of Sandra's murder. Bob asserted he was away on business, evaluating properties. They pressed him for particulars about his trip. Bob recounted departing the previous morning and staying overnight in Atlanta, presenting hotel receipts and emails to corroborate his alibi. However, Bob's keenness to validate his story raised the detectives' suspicions. Though cooperative and forthcoming, his repeated unsolicited assertions of innocence and frequent glances at his watch struck them as peculiar. His fidgeting hands hinted at unease, uncommon for someone grieving a loved one. The detectives resolved to delve deeper into Bob's activities. Commencing their scrutiny, the detectives examined security footage from the Atlanta hotel where Bob purportedly stayed. The video showed Bob checking in on March 14, 2022. About an hour later, an individual concealed in a hoodie and large sunglasses entered his room, remaining until around 10 p.m. Bob exited minutes after the hooded figure, and they were seen kissing in the parking lot before departing in separate vehicles. Intriguingly, Bob did not return to his hotel room until the early hours of the next morning. If he hadn't pursued the person in the hoodie, where had he gone? The detectives continued to investigate, wanting to know more about the mysterious person in the hoodie. As they reviewed earlier footage, they discovered that the person in the hoodie was a young blonde woman. The questions remained. Who was she? What was her relationship with Bob? And could she be connected to Sandra's murder? Furthermore, the detectives checked Bob's work records. They found out that Bob had canceled his scheduled business activities for March 14th and 15th. This contradicted his alibi, making it clear that Bob had lied about the purpose of his trip. Bob's behavior and the new information made him the prime suspect in Sandra's murder. The police needed more evidence, but it was becoming clear that Bob was hiding something important. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives were determined to find the truth about what happened to Sandra. This combination of suspicious behavior, a mysterious girlfriend, and discrepancies in Bob's story kept the detectives on high alert as they continued their investigation. They needed to uncover more details that would lead them to Sandra's killer. The second suspect in Sandra's murder was Carol Morgan, the blonde woman seen with Bob in the hotel video. Carol is a striking 24-year-old personal trainer known for her seductive demeanor and dedication to fitness. She was highly popular among male clients and had a reputation for getting too close to married men, sparking some gossip in the community. Both Bob and Sandra had known Carol for a while. Bob had hired Carol as his personal trainer, and she often visited their house for training sessions. Because of this, Carol was a familiar presence in Bob and Sandra's lives. Detectives Martinez and Harris decided to question Carol. They wanted to find out more about her relationship with Bob and any possible connection to Sandra's murder. When they brought Carol in for questioning, she seemed confident and cooperative. She answered their questions about her relationship with Bob. As the interrogation continued, the detectives began to uncover more about Carol's relationship with Bob. It came to light that Bob and Carol were having an affair. Carol remained unflustered when she admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Sandra's murder. Her calm demeanor and lack of emotion struck the detectives as unusual. Carol's affair with Bob added a new layer to the investigation. The detectives asked Carol if she knew about Sandra's murder or if she had been involved in any way. Carol denied any involvement, insisting that she had nothing to do with Sandra's death. She claimed that her relationship with Bob was purely for fun and had nothing to do with any crime. The detectives were not entirely convinced by Carol's story. They decided to look deeper into her background and her activities around the time of Sandra's murder. They wanted to see if there were any clues that might link Carol to the crime. The detectives followed up on Carol's alibi by interviewing her friends. They confirmed that Carol was indeed with them on the night of the murder, but something about the consistency of their stories seemed rehearsed. The detectives noted this and obtained Bob and Carol's phone records, discovering multiple calls between them over the past months. This suggested they were in regular contact, and it didn't look good for both Bob and Carol. As the investigation progressed, both Bob and Carol remained persons of interest. Bob's suspicious eagerness and Carol's too-perfect composure left the detectives with more questions than answers. The complex relationships and potential motives added layers to the case, making it clear that solving Sandra's murder would require thorough and careful investigation. On March 18, 2022, 3 days after Sandra's body was found, a significant piece of evidence surfaced. Detective Martinez discovered a series of emails between Bob and Carol. These emails detailed their affair and included discussions about Sandra. While the emails did not explicitly mention a plan to harm Sandra, they contained suspicious hints that suggested otherwise. "I think about your young, tight body all the time," Bob wrote to Carol. "I can't wait for the time when you and I can be together every night," Bob added. "Sandra is definitely way past prime." The emails were found on Bob's laptop, which the detectives had seized as part of their investigation. Detective Martinez carefully reviewed each message. One email from Carol read, "You can have my body every minute of the day, but you need to do something about Sandra first." Another from Bob mentioned, "I'll handle it soon." These cryptic messages were enough to raise alarm bells for the detectives. In addition to the emails, the detectives uncovered surveillance footage from a nearby park. The footage showed Carol meeting with another man on the evening of March 12th, just days before Sandra's murder. This man was later identified as Alan Wilson, a 23-year-old computer specialist known for his quiet demeanor and intelligence. Alan was a regular at the local chess club and often worked late hours on complex computer projects. The footage showed Carol and Alan engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation, their body language suggesting the meeting was significant. At one point, they were seen passing a small item between them, which the detectives speculated could be crucial evidence linked to the crime. Just as Carol was about to leave, Alan stopped her, and they shared a prolonged kiss, indicating a deeper connection between them. This new evidence suggested a deeper conspiracy involving more than just Bob and Carol. Detectives Martinez and Detective Harris decided to bring Alan Wilson in for questioning. They were now looking at the possibility that Alan was involved in the planning or execution of the murder. The detectives also continued to analyze the digital evidence from Bob's laptop, hoping to find more clues that could connect the dots. The discovery of these emails and the surveillance footage added a new layer of complexity to the case. It was becoming clear that Sandra's murder was not a simple crime of passion, but a calculated act involving multiple people. The detectives were determined to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy and bring everyone involved to justice. As the investigation progressed, the community of Savannah remained on edge. The detectives worked tirelessly, knowing that solving this case would require piecing together every fragment of evidence they could find. Alan Wilson, a 23-year-old computer specialist, was brought in for questioning. During the interrogation, detectives Martinez and Harris found Alan to be calm but evasive. He provided vague answers about his relationship with Carol Morgan and his involvement with Bob Harper. When asked about his meeting with Carol on the evening of March 12th, Alan claimed they were discussing a work-related project. However, his explanation lacked specifics and raised further suspicion. The detectives pressed Alan for more details, but he remained composed and offered little additional information. His evasiveness made the detectives more determined to uncover the truth. They decided to dig deeper into Alan's digital activities, hoping to find concrete evidence of his involvement in the murder plot. The investigation reached a breakthrough when forensic analysis traced the digital trail of Alan's hacking activities back to him. They discovered that Alan had used his computer skills to hack into Bob's financial records. Detectives Martinez and Harris confronted Alan with this evidence. They presented him with records of the unauthorized access to Bob's bank accounts. Alan's calm demeanor began to crack under the pressure of the mounting evidence. Alan admitted to accessing Bob's accounts at first. Alan refused to reveal that Carol had manipulated him into hacking Bob's financial records. He was hesitant and scared, but the detectives pressed him for more information. When the detectives informed Alan that Bob and Carol were having a sexual relationship, Alan finally broke down and confessed. Alan confessed that Carol seduced him by sleeping with him and manipulated him into hacking Bob's bank accounts with a promise of more sex. He said he had no idea that Carol was also having sex with Bob. Alan felt betrayed and angry when he found out the truth. Alan explained that Carol had told him she planned to extort money from Bob, claiming it was rightfully hers and that she worked hard for it. Whenever Alan asked her to clarify, she would always change the subject. Alan asserted that Carol never mentioned harming anyone and insisted he was unaware of any plan to murder Sandra. He expressed shock and devastation upon learning about her death. The detectives listened carefully to Alan's story. They needed to determine if he was telling the truth or if he was more involved than he admitted. Alan maintained his innocence regarding the murder, insisting he had no idea who killed Sandra. He seemed genuinely upset about being manipulated by Carol. Alan's confession about hacking Bob's accounts and being manipulated by Carol added another layer to the investigation. It showed that Carol was willing to go to great lengths to get what she wanted, even if it meant using someone like Alan. The detectives continued to piece together the puzzle, determined to bring all the responsible to justice. As the investigation unfolded, the community of Savannah followed the developments closely. It became evident that Bob killed his wife Sandra under Carol's manipulation. Carol used promises and cunning arguments to persuade Bob, convincing him that they could only be together if Sandra was out of the picture. She argued against divorce, warning it would ruin his career and social standing, and emphasized that divorce would mean sharing his wealth with Sandra. Carol knew Bob valued his wealth and status, using these factors to manipulate him into believing that eliminating Sandra was the better option. Carol's true nature was revealed through her actions and words. She was a greedy woman who wanted Bob's money and was willing to go to extreme lengths to get it. She didn't care about the consequences or the people she hurt along the way. Detectives Martinez and Harris uncovered that Carol had been planning this for quite some time. She knew Bob would be captivated by her beauty when they first met at a party. He then hired her as his personal trainer, and their affair began from that point. Bob and Carol would often secretly have sex in the house behind Sandra's back and would also meet out of town in various hotels for passionate encounters. During the investigation, the detectives uncovered more text messages and emails between Carol and Bob. These messages showed how Carol had slowly and methodically convinced Bob to commit the crime. Carol skillfully used her words and actions to manipulate Bob into believing that killing Sandra was the only way to secure their future happiness. She knew exactly how to push his buttons and exploit his weaknesses. She used flattery, promises, and fear to control him. Carol painted a picture of a perfect life together, full of love and passion, free from the problems that Sandra's presence created. As the detectives pieced together the evidence, it became clear that Carol was the mastermind behind Sandra's murder. With enough evidence gathered, detectives Martinez and Harris were ready to make arrests. On March 20, 2022, the detectives arrested Bob for carrying out the murder under Carol's manipulation. They arrived at Bob Harper's office, a sleek real estate agency in downtown Savannah. Bob was in the middle of a meeting with clients when the detectives walked in. He looked up in shock as they approached him, showing their badges and informing him that he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, Sandra Harper. Bob's reaction was one of utter panic. He stammered protests, insisting he was innocent and that there had been a mistake. His employees and clients watched in stunned silence as Bob was handcuffed and led out of the office. Detectives Martinez and Harris also arrested Carol, the true mastermind behind the entire scheme. Carol had cunningly used her sexual allure to manipulate Bob into murdering his wife. She believed she had complete control over him, so much so that she arrogantly dismissed any possibility of Bob breaking free from her influence and exposing her role in the crime. Her manipulation didn't stop with Bob. She had also ensnared Alan, convincing him to hack into Bob's bank accounts. Carol's confidence in her ability to manipulate men into doing her bidding was her downfall. She underestimated Bob's and Alan's potential to break free from her spell and reveal the truth to the authorities. Initially, Bob was reluctant to implicate Carol. However, the detectives cleverly revealed to him that Carol was also involved in a sexual relationship with Alan, and with Alan's help, she hacked into his bank accounts, planning to run away with his money. Realizing he had been manipulated by Carol, Bob was shaken by the gravity of his actions and eventually confessed everything to the detectives, including Carol's role in orchestrating the murder. Similarly, guilt-ridden and fearful of the consequences, Alan disclosed how Carol had manipulated him into committing the cybercrime. Carol's arrogance and belief in her invincibility led to her capture. Her carefully constructed web of deceit unraveled as the detectives pieced together the testimonies of her former puppets, ultimately bringing her criminal activities to light. Her greed and ruthlessness had led to tragedy, and now she would face justice for her crimes. Detectives Martinez and Harris were also determined to bring Alan Wilson to justice. Although Alan claimed he did not know about the murder plot, he had illegally accessed Bob's financial records, aiding Carol's scheme. The detectives gathered the remaining evidence needed to secure a warrant for Alan's arrest. Alan was arrested for his role in the crime, even though he insisted he had no idea about the plan to kill Sandra. Sandra's family, while devastated by her loss, expressed a sense of relief that justice was being served. They had been in a state of anguish since Sandra's murder, and the news of Bob's arrest brought them some measure of closure. They were particularly shocked to learn about the involvement of Carol, a regular visitor to the Harper home. The community of Savannah watched closely as the case continued to unfold, shocked by the betrayal and manipulation at the heart of this tragic story. The detectives' relentless pursuit of the truth had paid off, and they were committed to ensuring that all those involved in Sandra's murder faced the consequences of their actions. As the legal process moved forward, the people of Savannah hoped for a fair and just outcome that would honor Sandra's memory. The trial for Sandra Harper's murder began on December 5, 2022, in Savannah, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious locals. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Bennett, a determined and sharp 45-year-old lawyer known for her tough stance on crime. Bennett argued that Bob Harper, under Carol Morgan's manipulation, killed his wife to avoid a messy divorce that could ruin his career and social standing. Bennett presented compelling evidence, including incriminating emails between Bob and Carol, hotel footage of the two together, and phone records showing frequent communication. She contended that Bob, desperate to be with his girlfriend while preserving his career and lifestyle, committed the murder of his wife. The defense attorney, James Caldwell, was a 50-year-old lawyer known for his calm demeanor and skillful defense strategies. Caldwell argued that Bob was a victim of Carol's sexual manipulation, which drove him to kill his wife. He highlighted Bob's clean record and his cooperation with the police as proof that he was not a cold-blooded killer. As the trial progressed, emotional testimonies from Sandra's family members painted a vivid picture of the loss they had suffered. Her parents, James and Margaret Collins, spoke about their daughter's kindness, her dedication to teaching, and the impact of her death on their lives. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict on December 7, 2022. Bob Harper was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carol Morgan was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and received a 25-year prison sentence. Alan, who cooperated with the investigation, received a lesser sentence of 5-year imprisonment. Sandra's family expressed relief at the verdict, but were also saddened by the whole ordeal. They felt justice had been served, but knew that no punishment could bring Sandra back. The community of Savannah felt a mix of shock and closure as the trial had revealed the dark depths of betrayal and manipulation behind the murder. After the trial, life for all involved began to change dramatically. Bob Harper's world had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Bob started his life sentence in a Georgia state prison. He spent his days reflecting on his actions and the choices that led to his downfall. Once a respected real estate businessman, Bob's life had completely unraveled, and he became a cautionary tale about the consequences of falling for manipulative schemes. Bob felt deep remorse for killing his wife, Sandra. As he sat in his cell, the reality of his actions weighed heavily on him. He was haunted by the memory of what he had done, especially how he had tried to portray Sandra as an adulterous wife. Bob had posed her dead body to make it look like she had been unfaithful, but the truth was far from that. Sandra was a very good and kind person who had always been loyal and loving. Bob remembered the many ways Sandra had shown her kindness. She was always helping others, whether it was volunteering at the local shelter or simply being there for friends and family when they needed support. Sandra had a warm smile and a gentle heart, making everyone around her feel valued and loved. As he thought about their life together, Bob was filled with guilt and shame. Sandra had always been a faithful wife, and he had repaid her loyalty with betrayal. His affair with Carol and the subsequent murder were acts of utter selfishness and cowardice. Bob knew that Sandra deserved a loyal husband who would stand by her side. Instead, he allowed himself to be manipulated by Carol's lies and promises. The realization that Carol had used him hit him hard. She had manipulated him into committing the murder, knowing he would take the fall for his wife's death, leaving Carol free to abscond with money from his bank accounts, which he had accessed through Alan's computer skills. In his moments of reflection, Bob vowed to honor Sandra's memory by telling the truth and facing the consequences of his actions. It was a small step, but it was all he could do now to show his remorse and respect for the woman who had deserved so much better. Carol Morgan and Alan Wilson were sent to separate prisons to serve their prison sentences. Carol, once a beautiful personal trainer, struggled with the reality of prison life. Her once vibrant personality faded as she faced the consequences of her actions. Alan, the quiet computer specialist, retreated even further into himself, spending his time in prison libraries and avoiding other inmates as much as possible. Detectives Martinez and Harris continued their work in Savannah, receiving commendations for their thorough investigation and successful resolution of the case. The public praised their dedication and perseverance, and the case became a benchmark for future investigations in the area. Sandra's family tried to move forward, though the pain of their loss was ever present. Her parents, James and Margaret, found solace in their community and church, where they received an outpouring of support. They started a scholarship fund in Sandra's name to help students pursuing a career in education, hoping to keep her memory alive through positive contributions to the community. The community of Savannah slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Sandra's murder lingered. The case of Sandra Harper's murder left a lasting impact on everyone involved. It was a stark reminder of how quickly life can change and the devastating effects of betrayal and manipulation. As time passed, the community worked to heal, always remembering the kind-hearted teacher who was taken too soon. In the quiet, picturesque suburb of Winter Park, Central Florida, a shattering event unfolded on July 7, 2012, shaking the prosperous community to its core. The lives of two couples, Kyle and Lisa Thompson, and Mike and Sarah Roberts, became entangled in ways none could have predicted, culminating in a web of obsession, deceit, and ultimately deadly consequences. Kyle Thompson, a locally renowned artist of 36 years, was known throughout Winter Park for his amiable personality and creative talent. He was married to Lisa, a 34-year-old art instructor at a nearby college, who was equally admired for her dedication to her students and her passion for art. Mike Roberts, a prosperous investment consultant of 37 years, and his wife Sarah, a 33-year-old high school teacher beloved by her students, were among the Thompsons' closest friends. Yet, hidden beneath their seemingly ordinary friendship, these couples shared a secret lifestyle. They were swingers, engaging in a consensual arrangement that involved exchanging sexual partners. At first, this unconventional lifestyle brought a sense of exhilaration and intrigue to their otherwise routine suburban lives. It began as a curious exploration, a way to spice up their marriages and break free from the monotony of everyday life. However, as time passed, the complexities of their arrangement started to unravel, giving rise to a dangerous mix of jealousy, obsession, and resentment. Kyle's initial fascination with Sarah evolved into an overwhelming fixation, causing tension in his relationship with Lisa. He became increasingly preoccupied with Sarah, his thoughts consumed by her and his actions driven by his desire to be with her. Alarmed by the intensity of Kyle's growing obsession, Sarah decided to put an end to the swinging arrangement. She had initially found the experience exciting, but the emotional entanglements and Kyle's increasingly erratic behavior became too much for her to handle. Her decision to stop, however, did not deter Kyle. Instead, it set off a chain of tragic events that would ultimately lead to a devastating outcome. The Thompsons had been college sweethearts and were happily married for a decade. To their friends and family, they appeared to be the quintessential perfect couple, happy, deeply in love, and living a charmed life. Their home on Palm Street was a charming reflection of their lives together. It featured a spacious studio where Kyle created his art, surrounded by a meticulously maintained garden that Lisa took great pride in. The Roberts, who had moved to Winter Park 2 years after the Thompsons, quickly became an integral part of the neighborhood. Mike, with his outgoing nature, and Sarah, with her ever-ready smile and captivating charm, brought a vibrant energy to the community. The two couples first met at a community 4th of July picnic in 2009 and instantly hit it off. Over time, their friendship deepened, and they began to enjoy various outings together. They attended movies, theater performances, and shared dinners both at local restaurants and in each other's homes. One fateful evening in late 2009, during a dinner gathering at the Thompson house, the conversation took an unexpected turn. After enjoying a few rounds of drinks, the topic of swinging came up, sparking a lively and open-minded discussion. The couples found themselves intrigued by the idea, and by the end of the night, they had reached a mutual agreement to explore this new lifestyle together. That very night, the couples decided to swap partners for the first time. Kyle and Sarah spent the night together at the Thompson house, while Mike and Lisa went back to the Roberts home. Initially, the experience brought a fresh sense of excitement and rejuvenation to both marriages. The new arrangement became an occasional part of their weekends, with Kyle and Lisa and Mike and Sarah eagerly exploring their sexualities with their new partners. They found the experience thrilling and liberating, a way to add novelty and adventure to their otherwise stable and predictable lives. However, as time passed, subtle shifts in the dynamics between the four began to emerge, particularly in Kyle's behavior. His growing fixation with Sarah, initially unnoticed by the others, quickly escalated into a troubling and all-consuming obsession. Kyle's thoughts and actions became increasingly dominated by his desire for Sarah, leading to a series of events that would ultimately shatter the lives of all involved. The once harmonious friendship between the two couples began to unravel, replaced by a dark web of deceit, jealousy, and ultimately tragedy. The peaceful facade of Winter Park was forever altered by the events that unfolded on that fateful day in July 2012. The intertwined lives of the Thompsons and the Roberts, once a symbol of friendship and shared experiences, became a cautionary tale of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly perfect relationships. The community was left to grapple with the aftermath, a stark reminder of the destructive power of obsession and the fragility of human connections. Over time, Lisa Thompson began to harbor concerns about her husband Kyle's burgeoning interest in Sarah Roberts. She voiced these worries to Kyle, but he casually dismissed them as mere jealousy, assuring her that nothing was amiss. However, as days turned into weeks, Kyle's preoccupation with Sarah became increasingly conspicuous, and Lisa found it impossible to ignore. He started to disregard his artistic pursuits, spending less and less time in his studio. Instead, he sought out opportunities to be closer to Sarah, his fascination with her growing more evident with each passing day. Lisa, now acutely aware that something was awry in their marriage, began to monitor Kyle's behavior more closely. She noticed subtle changes in his demeanor, little signs that pointed to an escalating fixation on Sarah. During social gatherings, Lisa caught Kyle stealing prolonged glances at Sarah, his eyes lingering a little too long. Initially, Sarah was flattered by the attention, viewing it as harmless admiration. She was oblivious to the depth of Kyle's obsession, but as time wore on, she began to feel uncomfortable with his increasingly possessive behavior. Sarah confided in her husband Mike about her growing unease. She recounted Kyle's lingering gazes and his subtle yet persistent attempts to monopolize her time. However, Mike dismissed her concerns, attributing Kyle's behavior to innocent displays of interest and affection. He assured Sarah that she was overthinking the situation and that Kyle meant no harm. Yet, despite Mike's reassurances, Sarah's discomfort persisted, gnawing at her and casting a shadow over their once carefree, swinging arrangement. Her suspicions reached a boiling point. During a weekend retreat, the two couples took together to a luxurious resort in the Florida Keys in March 2012. What was meant to be a relaxing getaway turned into a tense and unsettling experience for Sarah. Kyle's obsession became more pronounced, his actions more brazen. He isolated Sarah, openly preferring her company to that of his wife and Mike. He engineered situations that would allow him to be alone with her, his intentions growing increasingly transparent. One evening, as the group sat around a beach fire, Kyle made a startling remark that sent shockwaves through Sarah. Casually, as if discussing the weather, he expressed his desire to abandon everything, his marriage, his career, his life, to start anew with Sarah. His words hung heavy in the air, causing Sarah to shift uncomfortably in her seat. Lisa, overhearing the conversation from a distance, felt a pang of jealousy and betrayal. She confronted Kyle later that night, but he brushed off his remarks as mere fantasies, insisting that he hadn't meant them seriously. His nonchalance only served to frustrate Lisa further, deepening the growing chasm between them. As Kyle's behavior grew more erratic and unpredictable, he began to seek Sarah out beyond the agreed-upon boundaries of their swinging arrangement. He would contrive reasons to visit her at work, his appearances becoming more frequent, and his advances more unwelcome. Sarah, once comfortable in her role as a high school teacher, now found herself looking over her shoulder, dreading the next time Kyle would appear unannounced. In a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation, Sarah decided to end the couple's wife-swapping arrangement. She hoped that by doing so, she could salvage her marriage with Mike and preserve what was left of their friendship with the Thompsons. However, her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately spiral out of control. One tense afternoon, while Mike was away on business, Kyle took the opportunity to express his feelings to Sarah. He painted a picture of a future together, one in which they could be happy and free from the constraints of their current lives. Sarah, however, was horrified by his advances. She firmly rejected him, insisting that she wanted out of their arrangement and that she had no desire to pursue a romantic relationship with him. Despite Kyle's pleas and his attempts to persuade her otherwise, Sarah stood her ground, resolute in her decision. In the aftermath of their confrontation, Sarah made a conscious effort to avoid Kyle. She hoped that by distancing herself from him, he would eventually come to his senses and realize the inappropriateness of his actions. Meanwhile, Lisa, increasingly disturbed by her husband's feelings for Sarah, attempted to reason with him. She begged him to step back from his obsessive behavior, to respect Sarah's wishes, and to focus on repairing their own marriage. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Kyle's obsession with Sarah had taken root too deeply, and he was unwilling, or perhaps unable, to let go. His appearances at Sarah's school became more frequent, his advances more insistent. He would wait for her after classes, approaching her under the guise of casual conversation, but always steering the topic back to their supposed future together. Sarah grew fearful, her once peaceful life now marred by Kyle's relentless pursuit. One fateful afternoon, as Sarah walked home from work through their usually quiet neighborhood, Kyle confronted her. He stepped into her path, his eyes wild and desperate. Sarah, steeling herself, reiterated her determination to end their arrangement. She repeated her concerns about the inappropriateness of his obsessive behavior, her voice steady and firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. However, her resolve only served to fuel Kyle's desperation. His pleas turned to accusations, his desperation to anger. He lashed out at her, his words cutting like knives, accusing her of betrayal and deceit. The once harmonious relationship between the two couples was now irrevocably damaged, shattered by Kyle's all-consuming obsession. The peaceful facade of their suburban lives had been torn away, revealing a dark and twisted web of deceit, jealousy, and ultimately, tragedy. The events that would unfold in the coming days would forever alter the course of their lives, leaving them all to grapple with the devastating consequences of their actions. The quiet, picturesque suburb of Winter Park would never be the same again, its serenity forever marred by the shadows of obsession and the echoes of shattered dreams. As Lisa Thompson tended to her garden outside, the sound of raised voices caught her attention. She paused, listening intently, and realized that the commotion was coming from nearby. A sense of unease washed over her as she recognized the voices of her husband, Kyle, and their friend, Sarah Roberts. The tension in their exchange was palpable, and Lisa felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to intervene before the situation spiraled out of control. Dropping her gardening tools, Lisa hurried towards the source of the argument. As she approached, she could see Kyle and Sarah standing close together, their bodies rigid with tension. Kyle's face was contorted with anger, while Sarah's expression was a mix of fear and defiance. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she took in the scene. With a sharp, piercing voice that cut through the air, Lisa called out to Kyle. "Kyle, what's going on here?" Her sudden presence seemed to jolt Kyle out of his angry state. He turned to look at Lisa, his eyes wide with surprise and confusion. Sarah, seizing the opportunity, quickly stepped away from Kyle, her body trembling with relief. Lisa moved to stand between Kyle and Sarah, her gaze fixed firmly on her husband. "Kyle, you need to calm down," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "Whatever is going on, we can sort it out together." Sarah, grateful for Lisa's intervention, took another step back. I need to go," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa nodded, her eyes never leaving Kyle's face. "Yes, Sarah, you should go. We'll handle this." As Sarah hurried away, Lisa turned her full attention to Kyle. She could see the storm of emotions raging within him: anger, betrayal, desperation. Inwardly, she was deeply disturbed, her own feelings of jealousy and rage against Sarah welling up inside her. She knew that their lives had been irreversibly altered, and her loyalty to Kyle compelled her to place the blame squarely on Sarah's shoulders. The couple's wife-swapping relationship, once a source of excitement and novelty, had reached an irreversible breaking point due to Kyle's obsession with Sarah. Lisa began to view Sarah's decision to terminate the arrangement as the precipitating cause of the ensuing chain of events that could not be undone. She believed that if Sarah had not ended the arrangement, Kyle's obsession would not have escalated to this point. Kyle, his breath coming in ragged gasps, looked at Lisa with a mixture of pain and confusion. "Lisa, I don't know what to do," he confessed, his voice trembling with emotion. Lisa reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "We'll figure it out together, Kyle," she reassured him, even as her own mind raced with thoughts of anger and betrayal. As the dust settled from the altercation, Kyle was left in a state of utter confusion and turmoil. Sarah's resolute rejection and Lisa's unexpected intervention had shaken him to his core. That night, as he returned home, his mind was consumed by a tumult of anger, betrayal, and desperation. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control, and he was powerless to stop it. Lisa, sensing the storm brewing within her husband, attempted to pacify his troubled thoughts. She sat with him, talking softly and offering words of comfort. But despite her best efforts, Kyle remained inconsolable. In the days that followed, he swung between anger and depression, his thoughts fixated on Sarah's rejection and what he perceived as her betrayal. Lisa, unable to reach him, grappled with mounting frustration and fear. She tried to maintain a sense of normalcy in their relationship, but the anger she felt towards Sarah continued to grow. She found herself torn between her loyalty to Kyle and her own feelings of jealousy and resentment. Meanwhile, Sarah was determined to move forward with her life. She avoided Kyle altogether, focusing on her work and her relationship with Mike. She refrained from disclosing the full extent of Kyle's obsession to Mike, fearful of the potential fallout if he were to find out. Sarah hoped that by distancing herself from Kyle, she could put an end to the turmoil and find a peaceful resolution. However, her hopes were shattered a few days later when Kyle awaited her outside her house as she left for work. Sarah, startled by his presence, braced herself for another confrontation. Kyle's pleas were louder and more emotional this time, his desperation palpable. But Sarah remained firm, maintaining her boundaries and refusing to engage with his advances. Kyle's attempt to detain Sarah eventually drew the attention of a neighbor who intervened, threatening to call the police if Kyle did not leave. Shaken by the incident, Kyle retreated, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and despair. Sarah, seeking help and guidance, turned to Lisa. She hoped that Lisa, as Kyle's wife and her friend, could provide some insight or assistance. But Lisa, now driven by jealousy and resentment towards her newly perceived rival, rebuffed all of Sarah's attempts at cooperation. She saw Sarah as the cause of her marital strife and the turmoil in their lives. By the evening of July 7th, 2012, Kyle Thompson was a man on the edge. His anxiety about the situation had grown to an unbearable level. He began to drink heavily, his thoughts turning dark and ominous. In his drunken stupor, he became convinced that suicide was the only solution to his inner turmoil. Emotionally distraught, he stumbled into his and Lisa's bedroom, his mind a chaotic mess of despair and desperation. Lisa, finding him in this state, was both alarmed and determined. She saw an opportunity to redirect Kyle's anguish and channel it into a sinister plan. She convinced him that Sarah was the root of their problems, the cause of their suffering. Together, they formulated a plan to rid themselves of Sarah, setting the stage for a dark alliance born out of necessity and dread. That very night, with Mike Roberts away on a business trip, Kyle broke into the Roberts house. His heart pounded in his chest as he made his way through the darkened rooms, his mind focused on the grim task at hand. He found Sarah in her bedroom, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. With a heavy heart and a trembling hand, Kyle confronted Sarah in her sleep. In a brutal and irrevocable act, he stabbed her to death, the violence of his actions shocking even himself. Horrified by the brutality of his crime, Kyle fled the scene, his mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. He returned home in a distressed state, his clothes stained with blood and his eyes wide with shock. Lisa, hearing him enter, rushed to his side. She took one look at him and knew that the deed was done. Swiftly, she took control of the situation, her mind racing with the urgency of their predicament. She guided Kyle to their bathroom, instructing him to remove his bloodied clothes and cleanse himself of the evidence. Her thoughts were consumed by the need to act quickly, to cover up the crime and safeguard their hidden lives. She knew that they were standing on the precipice of disaster, and one wrong move could send their world crashing down around them. As Lisa scrubbed the blood from Kyle's hands, she couldn't help but feel a sense of grim determination. She was resolved to protect her husband, to shield him from the consequences of his actions. Together, they would navigate the dark and treacherous path that lay ahead, their lives forever altered by the choices they had made. The once peaceful suburb of Winter Park was forever changed by the events that unfolded on that fateful night. The intertwined lives of the Thompsons and the Roberts had taken a dark and twisted turn, leaving the community to grapple with the devastating consequences of their actions. The echoes of that night would reverberate through their lives, a haunting reminder of the price they paid for their secrets and obsessions. As Kyle stood under the scalding spray of the shower, watching the water run red at his feet, Lisa sprang into action. She gathered his blood-soaked clothes, stuffing them into a garbage bag, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Every fiber of her being was focused on protecting her husband and concealing the horrifying truth of what they had done. Dropping to her knees, she scrutinized the floor, her eyes scanning for any droplets of blood that may have escaped their notice. With meticulous care, she scrubbed the tiles, erasing any trace of the gruesome act that had taken place mere hours ago. She knew that the future of their lives together depended on her ability to remove every vestige of the crime. Once Kyle emerged from the shower, his skin scrubbed raw and his eyes haunted by the night's events, Lisa sat him down at the kitchen table. She needed him to focus, to recount every detail of the incident so that they could begin to formulate a plan. Their survival depended on their ability to create a convincing alibi and to dispose of any evidence that might link them to the murder. Lisa's mind raced as she considered their options. She knew that they needed someone to corroborate their story, someone who would be willing to lie for them. Her thoughts turned to her sister, Ava. Despite the late hour, she picked up the phone and dialed her number, her fingers trembling as she waited for her to answer. "Ava," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need your help. Kyle and we've done something terrible. I can't explain now, but I need you to say that Kyle was with you tonight. Please, Ava, I'm begging you." To Lisa's immense relief, Ava agreed without hesitation, her loyalty to her sister unwavering. With their alibi secured, Lisa turned her attention to the physical evidence that could incriminate them. She knew that the bloodied clothes and the murder weapon had to be disposed of in a way that would leave no trace. Under the cover of darkness, she drove to a secluded location outside of town, her heart pounding in her chest with every passing mile. She found a remote spot, far from prying eyes, where she proceeded to burn Kyle's blood-stained clothes, the acrid smell of smoke filling the air. Once the clothes had been reduced to ashes, she dug a deep hole in the ground, burying the murder weapon and the charred remains of the clothes. As she filled the hole, she sent a silent prayer to the heavens, hoping that this act would be enough to destroy any remaining evidence of their crime. The murder of Sarah Roberts remained undiscovered until the morning of Monday, July 9, 2012. Mike Roberts returned home from his business trip, eager to be reunited with his wife. As he stepped into their bedroom, he was greeted by a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Sarah lay lifeless on the bed, her body brutally stabbed 26 times, the sheets around her soaked in blood. Horrified, Mike dialed 911, his voice shaking as he relayed the grim discovery to the operator. Within minutes, a police team led by Detective Aaron Jenkins was dispatched to the scene. What they found was a gruesome tableau, a once peaceful home now transformed into a crime scene. A loving wife and mother brutally murdered in her own bed. As the police began to gather evidence, they turned their attention to the neighbors, hoping to find any information that might shed light on the crime. The Thompsons, living just a short distance away, were among the first to be questioned. Lisa, her alibi meticulously crafted, faced the detectives with a composed demeanor, her answers steady and confident. Kyle, on the other hand, was a picture of distress. His eyes were haunted, his body trembling as he recounted his supposed whereabouts on the night of the murder. Despite his visible anguish, the detectives found no reason to doubt his story. The Thompsons' alibi, corroborated by Ava, seemed airtight, and the police turned their attention to other potential leads. As the days turned into weeks, the psychological burden of the murder weighed heavily on both Kyle and Lisa. Kyle, already emotionally fragile, found himself consumed by paranoia. He became convinced that the police were closing in on him, that they could see through his carefully constructed facade. He withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Lisa, though outwardly composed, was not immune to the strain of their secret. She became hypervigilant, scrutinizing every interaction and behavior for signs of suspicion. She watched the news obsessively, her heart leaping into her throat every time Sarah Roberts' name was mentioned. She knew that one wrong move, one slip of the tongue, could bring their carefully crafted world crashing down around them. In the midst of their turmoil, Lisa took on the role of stabilizer, determined to keep their lives from spiraling out of control. She managed Kyle's growing paranoia, soothing his fears and reassuring him that they were safe. She maintained their public facade, attending social gatherings and community meetings with a smile on her face, even as her heart ached with the weight of their secret. Lisa knew that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to construct a narrative that would divert attention away from Kyle. She suggested to Kyle that he should appear more distraught over Sarah's death, aligning with the community's grief and deflecting suspicion. At social gatherings and community meetings, Kyle, now entirely under Lisa's control, played the part of the grieving friend to perfection. He spoke of Sarah with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes often welling up with tears as he recounted memories of their time together. Mike Roberts, devastated by the loss of his wife and desperate for answers, seemed to appreciate Kyle's empathy. He leaned on his friend for support, unaware of the dark truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. Yet, despite Lisa's careful guidance, Kyle's mental state continued to deteriorate. His guilt manifested in nightmares and hallucinations, driving him to seek solace in the bottom of a bottle. Lisa, fearing that Kyle might confess in a drunken stupor, maintained a constant vigil over him. She stayed up late into the night watching him as he drank, ready to intervene if he showed any sign of wavering. She knew that one slip, one moment of weakness, could undo all of their careful planning and send their lives spiraling out of control. One evening, as Kyle slumped over a glass of whiskey, his body racked with sobs, he turned to Lisa with a look of utter despair. "I can't do this anymore, Lisa," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live with this guilt. I need to come clean." Panic surged through Lisa's veins as she grasped the implications of Kyle's words. She knew that she had to act quickly to find a way to keep him from confessing. Desperate to maintain their composure, she suggested they take a short trip out of town, seeking refuge in a secluded cabin nestled deep in the mountains of North Georgia. The change of scenery was intended to help Kyle find some semblance of peace, to give him a chance to escape the constant reminders of their crime. The isolation offered them a temporary reprieve, allowing them to strategize their next moves without the constant pressure of the investigation looming over them. During their time at the cabin, Lisa continued to coach her husband, emphasizing the importance of secrecy and instructing him on how to handle police questioning and public interactions. She drilled him relentlessly, her voice firm and unyielding as she guided him through their carefully crafted narrative. She knew that their future depended on his ability to maintain their story, to keep their secret hidden from the world. Lisa's unwavering determination to protect her husband and avoid imprisonment fueled her every action. She meticulously crafted a web of deceit, ensuring that every detail of their story aligned perfectly. Kyle, though still fragile, began to find solace in the routines Lisa established, clinging to her guidance as a lifeline. Together, They navigated the treacherous waters of their shared secret, their bond strengthened by the desperate need to keep their crime hidden from the world. The once peaceful suburb of Winter Park remained blissfully unaware of the dark truth lurking beneath the surface, as the Thompsons fought to keep their grim reality concealed behind a facade of normalcy. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation into Sarah Roberts' murder began to lose momentum. The police, despite their best efforts, were no closer to finding her killer. The community, once united in grief and outrage, began to move on, their attention turning to other matters. But for Kyle and Lisa Thompson, there was no escape from the past. Their lives were forever altered by the choices they had made, the secrets they kept, and the lies they told. They lived in a constant state of tension, their every move calculated to maintain the facade of innocence they had so carefully constructed. And so, they continued to live their lives, haunted by the ghosts of their past, bound together by the dark secret that threatened to consume them both. The echoes of that fateful night would forever reverberate through their lives, a haunting reminder of the price they paid for their sins. Upon their return to Winter Park 2 weeks later, the Thompsons attempted to resume their lives, driven by a renewed sense of purpose, yet still haunted by Kyle's actions. He managed to present a more composed exterior, while Lisa meticulously orchestrated their interactions with friends and colleagues, ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, cracks began to appear in their carefully crafted facade. Neighbors and friends started to notice Kyle's increased drinking, trembling hands, and erratic behavior. Whispers of his possible involvement in Sarah's death began to circulate, casting shadows of doubt over the Thompsons' seemingly innocent demeanor. Upon hearing these rumors, Lisa, ever vigilant, worked tirelessly to suppress them. However, as the police investigation persisted under the keen eye of Detective Aaron Jenkins, new evidence emerged, threatening to shatter the Thompsons' carefully constructed alibi and plunge their world into chaos. Detective Jenkins conducted separate follow-up interviews with Lisa and Kyle, diligently noting any discrepancies in their stories. Lisa's meticulously crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and despite his occasional erratic behavior, Kyle's emotional state appeared genuine, aligning with that of a grieving friend. Yet Jenkins's intuition gnawed at him, suggesting there was more to uncover. As the weeks passed, additional evidence surfaced, including forensic analysis of Sarah's phone records. These records revealed a series of desperate text messages from Kyle, highlighting his unhealthy obsession with her. Armed with this discovery, Jenkins brought Kyle in for further questioning, pressing him on the inconsistencies in his alibi and the true nature of his relationship with Sarah. Despite Kyle's struggle to maintain his composure and adhere to the story Lisa had coached him on, his nervousness and evasive answers only served to heighten the detective's suspicions. The turning point in the investigation came when a crucial witness stepped forward. Robert Hensley, a 79-year-old neighbor of the Roberts who lived across the street, provided vital information. He had witnessed Kyle's confrontation with Sarah outside her house and had threatened to call the police. Additionally, he had seen Kyle near the Roberts' residence on the night of the murder. This testimony, combined with the forensic evidence and Kyle's erratic behavior, was sufficient for the police to obtain a search warrant for the Thompsons' home. During the search, traces of Sarah's blood were discovered, having seeped into the floorboards despite Lisa's thorough cleaning efforts. This damning evidence, coupled with witness testimonies and phone records, painted a clear picture of Kyle's guilt. The net was tightening around the Thompsons, and Lisa realized that their carefully constructed facade was on the verge of collapse. As the evidence against Kyle mounted, Detective Jenkins prepared to make his move. He brought Kyle in for another round of questioning, this time adopting a different approach. He presented all the gathered evidence, including the phone records, witness testimonies, and forensic findings. Overwhelmed and cornered, Kyle began to crumble under the pressure. Jenkins pressed harder, suggesting that a confession might lead to a more lenient sentence. Unable to bear the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, Kyle finally broke down and confessed to killing Sarah. He detailed his obsession with her, the confrontations that led to her murder, and the fateful night that sealed her fate. However, in his confession, Kyle also implicated Lisa, revealing her role in covering up the crime. He described how she had helped him clean up the scene, dispose of the evidence, and craft their alibi. The intricate web of deceit they had woven began to unravel, exposing the dark truth hidden beneath their seemingly perfect lives. The once peaceful suburb of Winter Park was forever altered by the revelations of that day. The Thompsons' carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing a chilling tale of obsession, deceit, and murder. The community was left to grapple with the devastating consequences of the Thompsons' actions, a haunting reminder of the dark secrets that can lurk behind even the most ordinary of lives. Seizing the chance to uncover the entire story, Detective Jenkins arranged for Lisa to be brought in for questioning as well. Initially, Lisa denied any involvement, but once confronted with the full extent of Kyle's confession, she realized there was no escape. Her intricately woven lies had unraveled. She admitted to aiding Kyle, explaining that she had acted out of a misguided sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything they had built together. In November 2012, the trial of Kyle and Lisa Thompson commenced in a packed courtroom at the Orange County Courthouse in Orlando, Florida. Kyle Thompson, once a celebrated artist and respected member of the community, faced charges of first-degree murder. His wife, Lisa, was charged with being an accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. Both pleaded guilty to their respective charges. Due to his full confession, which also implicated Lisa, Kyle avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Lisa received a lighter sentence of 15 to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 10 years. In the wake of the trial, the close-knit community of Winter Park struggled to heal from the deep wounds left by the murder. Mike Roberts, left to rebuild his shattered life, found some comfort in the justice served, but continued to mourn the loss of his beloved wife. He deeply regretted the wife-swapping arrangement he had once enthusiastically supported. Determined to start anew, Mike moved away from the area and eventually resettled in Colorado, where he remarried. Kyle and Lisa Thompson began their new lives behind bars, with Kyle incarcerated at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida, and Lisa serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution north of Ocala. In 2022, Lisa became eligible for parole but was denied. She is expected to be released from prison by 2037. The tragic case of Sarah Roberts serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of obsession and the fragility of life and love. The once peaceful suburb of Winter Park was forever changed by the dark secrets and devastating consequences that unfolded within its boundaries. As the community continued to grapple with the aftermath, the echoes of the Thompsons' actions lingered, a haunting testament to the destructive power of deceit and the irreparable harm caused by their choices. The memory of Sarah Roberts lived on, a poignant reminder of the lives forever altered by the tragic events that transpired.